Rand Paul, Republican senator from Kentucky, joins us now. Would you join other Republicans who say no to tariffs on Mexico?
You know, tariffs are simply a tax on the American people, and I've generally been opposed to new taxes on the American people.
Sure.
I think the more money you send to government, the less helpful it is for the private economy, which drives the engine of our capitalist economy. So I'm not really for tariffs. I also think that it's an abuse of the emergency system in the sense that I think the emergencies were set up such if, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, you might be allowed to put tariffs on Japan. But I don't think they were intended really to be used willy-nilly throughout time. And so I'm not a real big fan of using emergency powers and giving the president emergency powers. I think really the checks and balances and the separation of powers between Congress and the president were very important to our founding and something we should stand up for.
So do you think the Republicans will slap this down? No tariffs on Mexico?
We'll see, because we've had this discussion before with the president on emergency powers when he used it for spending. I think there's actually gathering momentum. There are a lot of farm state senators who are very worried about what tariffs do to the farming community. About 25% of what we grow in the U.S. is exported. And so when I talk to my farmers back at home, they're very concerned. But there were some farm state senators who didn't oppose the president's last emergency, who I think might in this case. So I think there would be some danger to the president that we could actually have a veto-proof disapproval of any new tariffs on Mexico.
That's interesting. Senator, last time you were on the show, you presented your old budget plan, cut each department's spending by 1% over a period of years. That would balance the budget very quickly. And that was voted on, but it went down to defeat, 69 to 22. So a lot of Republicans opposed your spending plan.
It's kind of disappointing. Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing. The Democrats don't make any pretense. They don't think there's a problem with deficits and spending, and they're not going to vote to cut spending. Republicans at least go home and they tell people we're conservative. We're more conservative than the Democrats. But then when actually push comes to shove, and I had them vote on cutting a penny or two from the budget, basically we would leave spending at 98% for 5 years of what we currently spend, and then we gradually let the spending grow at 2% after that. But the budget would actually balance within 5 years. Every one of these Republicans voted for the balanced budget amendment, which requires the budget to balance in 5 years, but then less than half of them will vote when actually presented with a budget that balances, will actually do the hard vote and say, yes, I'll vote to cut spending.
Actual spending cuts are the third rail of politics. I think that's where we are, sir.
Probably, but I think the people are in a different place. I mean, I told people from the very beginning that there's not enough money for Social Security or Medicare, and you're going to have to raise the age of eligibility, not because I dislike older folks, but because if you want these programs to be sound. So I think people are actually willing to hear that and willing to hear someone who's honest enough to say, hey, we got a real problem with the debt. We're borrowing $1.5 million every minute, $22 trillion total debt. Think what the markets would do if we actually did a balancing act and balanced our budget over 5 years.
My goodness me. We're listening to you, Senator, and thank you very much for being on the show again today. Rand Paul, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.